Okay, we're ready to get started. This is Baltimore City Biennial Audits Oversight Commission. My name is Eric Costello, councilman for the 11th District. I chair the commission. I'm joined on my left by members of the commission, Director of Finance, Henry Raymond, Comptroller Joan Pratt, Inspector General Isabel Cumming, Councilman Bill Henry from the 4th District, and then to my right, Council President Bernard C. Jack Young. We're also joined by Councilman John Bullock from the 9th District. We have Marguerite Curran, staff to the committee, Karan Banks representing Mayor Catherine Pugh. This commission was established by a charter amendment in 2016. This is the 4th of our hearings. We're required by charter to meet twice per year. Our last meeting was on September 19th, 2018. Committee members should have a copy of the minutes from the September 19th meeting. If there's no discussion of any of the minutes, I will accept a motion to move the minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Council President Young. Second by Comptroller Pratt. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion carries with 6 yeas, and Councilmember Leon Pinkett is absent. Next item is we had a discussion of Department of Planning as well as Baltimore Police Department, which was follow-up from email conversations that the commission has had since our last meeting on September 19th. I believe that I provided everyone on the commission a copy of a letter from the Department of Planning with respect to one of the audit items, or specifically objectives, that Ms. Askew had been asked to look into, which had to do with equity around the capital budget. Department of Planning had committed in that letter to report on that information separately from that audit item, as that was more of a reportable item as opposed to a researchable question or objective. I believe we voted on this over email, but just for the record, if there are any concerns with this, let's open it up for dialogue. Otherwise, is there a motion to accept Department of Planning's request and have the auditor not look at the amount of funding in the capital budget based on equity, considering A, that they have committed to report on this information in another forum, as well as B, they are the only department within city government that does have someone that's fully staffed to equity analysis. Is there any discussion on that, or Councilman Henry?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, Council President Young, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I would like to know why they wouldn't want to report out on that when the planning department is charged with, you know, overseeing a lot of development that goes on in the city, and they comment on just about everything. So why would they be opposed to, you know, releasing or being a part of that information?
From my discussions with the director and assistant director, who's now acting director, Lori Feinberg, they have no problem with reporting on that information, Mr. President, and making that information publicly available. I think the concern was that it wasn't really a researchable question in terms of an audit, something that the auditor would specifically look at. It was more of a self-reporting as to them analyzing the capital budget and seeing if those dollars were spent equitably like they should be. So the motion was really to excuse the auditor from looking at that as an objective in her audit of Department of Planning, if that makes sense.
I would probably be the only one that object to that, because I think they should. I think she should be looking at that, because that's really something that's we're getting beat up on anyway from various groups. So I think she should look at that and report out on that. That's just my personal opinion, but we have other board members here who might have a different opinion than I do.
Councilman Henry?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, Council President, I totally agree with you. I don't, I think I understand.
It's going to snow.
Pardon? Oh. Sir, we have been on the same side on multiple occasions, especially ones on the issue of equity, and this is a case where I'm not sure of. Well, I understand. I think the point that the director and assistant director were making. I think it sends a bad sign to not be explicitly looking for third-party verification. I mean, that is kind of the point of an audit. And even if it will be a little bit harder for the auditors to do work that the planning department has not already been doing, I personally don't see why we should be acquiescing to this request.
I think part of the challenge was the city auditor determining an actually researchable question for the audit. So are we talking about self-reporting, or are we talking about what would be the question that the auditor would look at? Inspector General?
Well, my question is, I just wanted to know what the city auditor's opinion on this is.
Whatever you ask, I'll do.
No, but as a CPA and as an auditor, what is your thoughts on this?
Well, the
rely on you
Department
as the expert.
All right, the Department of Planning should allow us to audit that, and so we defer that back to the board. But we were ready to audit that particular.
Well, then I think we should. I agree. Which means I agree with the council president too.
Maybe the snow is not going to come in.
Further discussion.
Thank you. Do you have a, what is the researchable question that you'd be looking at?
Well, we're looking at the amount of funding in the capital budget, right?
Right.
Okay, so what we would, I guess, have some discussion with the client on is their processes or the procedures. And then from there we would develop an area to audit. That's how we perform our audits. So we would gauge from them what they do, and then try to figure out how we can determine how they determine the amount of funding in the capital budgets annually, or maybe over those 2 years.
But they don't. The Department of Planning doesn't determine the amount of money that's in the capital budget. They're just the gatekeeper.
Right. So they're the.
Mr. Chair, may I?
Please.
While I appreciate, I think the moral of your point, the Planning Commission and the Planning Department enjoy portraying themselves as the people who develop the capital budget, and whether they are merely executing the vision of others or not, they are responsible under the charter for doing so in terms of developing it, and then it comes to us to do the final approval. If I were to engage in some cynical speculation, I would say that we're an auditor to research this matter in the fashion that the auditor just described. What they will find is there are absolutely no processes that the planning department is following that currently view this through an equity lens. Now, whether the planning department is happy to stipulate to that to avoid having it in writing somewhere, I don't know that we need to be protecting their reputation.
And can I say something?
Mr. President.
And because planning, really, we're working on this equity lens, I can't see them not wanting to do this, because it's something that they push. It wasn't something that the mayor or anybody else pushed. They was doing this on their own about the equity lens. So I'm concerned because when I look at the capital budget and I look at all of the organizations that get money, it is not representative of the city, in my opinion. You know, and I know that we own the Museum of Art. I know we own the Walters and those various entities that are city-owned that I know we have to give money to. But also there's other entities out there that's a minority of minority interest that really does not get the level of capital money that I think they should get. Almost none.
Okay. Any other? Director Raymond?
I think in the interest of accountability and transparency, I would be in favor of having this requirement to support the auditor's request.
Mr. Chair,
So
can we
what-
go back 1 minute?
Mr. President?
Because I concur with Councilman Henry. Planning takes the ultimate responsibility for putting this information out, and they take ownership of it. So if they're going to take ownership of it, then it needs to be audited because, you know, they put it out. You know, when I call them and ask them certain things about certain, you know, pieces of the capital budget, you know, they own it, and they give me excuses of why why they do it. So,
It needs to be tested.
Okay. So all of those in favor of asking the auditor to include a preliminary analysis of capital funding appropriated for projects in terms of equity, say aye.
aye.
All those opposed say nay. Nay?
No, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm a nay. Okay, so please include that in the next.
You said you're a nay?
Yes.
So we've already issued the performance audit for planning for this year. So are you saying to add an addendum, a separate one for January maybe? We can do it, perform it in January.
Do we want an addendum, or do we want to roll that into the next biennial audit?
Oh, If you have the capacity to do an addendum in the relative short term, then I think that would be the most productive.
We can perform it in January.
You can do one in January? Is anyone opposed to doing an addendum in January? Okay.
So you're voting no because you voted no before?
Well, not only that, there's no objective for what they're actually going to be auditing. I mean, they're basically just self-reporting.
Well, we'll see what they self-report.
Right. I mean, I would respectfully disagree, but I mean, it's in order to have an objective, you have to have some type of criteria. So.
We'll see if she can come up with a criteria.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so next item was Baltimore Police Department, and one of the items that have come up was overtime spending as an audit objective. Just open it up for discussion. We had, I believe the administration had started a overtime audit. I guess we'll turn it over to Director Raymond to talk about that.
Good evening. In reference to the overtime audit being conducted by an outside forensics auditing firm, it is underway. We have previously, in the last month and a half, briefed the City Council on the results of that. The audit continues, and essentially, there's no further update at this point other than what we provided the briefing on approximately a month ago.
And I think the question was whether or not we asked the auditor to also look at BPD overtime.
And I think from the finance department perspective, we believe that that would result in duplication of effort with the resources that are being spent by the present outside forensics audit firm. As finance director, I do not believe that there's anything additional to be gained by having a second audit on the same subject matter.
Mr. President?
Thank you. I would have to respectfully, disagree. I believe in transparency, and even though we have an outside audit, it's the job of the auditor that's in the controller's office to audit things that we want to have audited. And I think police overtime should be audited by our auditor. I don't think that it's going to hurt us to spend a few more dollars to make sure, and it's not that I don't trust the outside audit, but just to make sure that we cross our T's and dot our I's.
I would again ask the city auditor, what is her opinion on this one? You're our expert, so we have to rely on you.
I do agree with Mr. Raymond because we're duplicating efforts. But I also understand what President Young is saying because it would be two different set of eyes. You can have two different auditors coming to perform the same audit and they can come out with two different conclusions. But I believe that the other audit firm has already stated that they have found that there was some overtime issues related to this. So that's what they've kind of concluded. It wasn't like they gave a clean opinion.
Okay. Well, if I can respond back to that, then I would accept that because you said that it's duplication. But in the future, I think rather than paying an outside auditor to come and do that, that we do it in-house and your agency be the one to do that.
Okay.
And I would agree with the president, and I think on some of the forensic stuff, if you don't have the staff for it, that would be the appropriate time to seek outside technical assistance. Councilman Henry?
Just for a point of clarification, did you ask the outside auditor, or how did that happen? If this was in your bailiwick in the beginning?
What, for the duplicating of efforts?
Yeah, no, I'm interested in knowing.
Oh, no, I wasn't involved with that, with the selection of the outside auditors.
So did the outside auditors come about because you could not do an audit of, did you feel you couldn't do an audit of the overtime, or
No,
what
that
happened?
was not the case.
Yeah.
I believe Mr. Raymond would know the answer to that.
The mayor directed the overtime audit of the Baltimore Police Department, and the city solicitor sought proposals from forensic audit firms to accomplish that directive.
Okay. It was like a time, it was like a situation where we wanted it done as quickly as possible.
Yes.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
So, two questions, I think, one for Mr. Raymond and then one for Ms. Askew. When the mayor and the solicitor determined the need for an overtime audit that could be done quickly, did anyone ask the Department of Audits how quickly they could do one?
I believe the answer to that is yes.
Okay. Okay. And then the second question for Ms. Askew is, will it in any way inconvenience or disrupt the audit that you're doing for the rest of the police department to be auditing everything else about the financials, but not the overtime?
No, we actually performed a portion of the overtime audit with our internal control testing on the CAFR. So we did audit police separately. And that audit has not been released, so I can't disclose that.
Okay.
Councilman, or just as a reminder, the audit of BPD overtime was on the performance side, not on the financial side.
And you haven't done the performance?
For the police, correct.
Oh, I'm sorry,
but I'm
you're
saying,
regarding to how I asked. I'm sorry, I understand.
right, but
So,
I'm saying we did capture overtime in our financial
in your financial
audit.
one, I got you. But you're going to be doing a performance audit, and you will simply now just not focus
Correct.
on overtime as one of the issues in your performance audit.
Correct. But we did capture it, and we have completed that.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Any other discussion? Okay, so is the commission in favor of asking the auditor to not look at BPD overtime in consideration of the fact that we already have a forensic audit firm who's looking at that and has made preliminary recommendations, or the opposite? So is there, yeah, I think, so we have a motion to ask the auditor to not look at BPD overtime as part of the performance audit.
Second.
Okay, so motion by Comptroller Pratt,
Henry second.
second by Director Raymond. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay.
I'm going to say, I'd like to abstain on this. Because I really am totally torn on whether we should be going ahead and doing a potentially duplicative but I mean, I guess I'm seeing both sides, and I'm not totally comfortable agreeing to consciously not do it.
Okay, Councilman Henry, what I'm saying is we did capture it even though it was not part of, we did not audit that specifically for the performance side. On the CAFRA side, we did audit police separately as well as fire.
And so did you find anything that you would did you find anything that you would mention in a performance audit?
We found more than what we would mention in a performance audit.
Okay, so since you've already, I guess, Ben, maybe, Mr. Chair, maybe this is a bad time to ask this, but since you've already done the work, why would we ask her not to put those results in the report if she's already done the work?
Because that's related to the CAFR, and the CAFR has not been released.
That's okay, neither has the audit.
That's true, but that is part of the CAFR audit. It was not audited. I mean, if they want to, that's fine with me. It's just that we can disclose that separately. But we did audit that, and that has been completed.
Yeah. So, Mr. Chair, if I vote yes to the existing,
you already voted to abstain.
okay, that's fine. I'll leave out my. But could I now make a motion to that we ask her to do what she just described that she can do?
And what is that exactly?
For the CAFR audit, we performed internal control testings for payroll, which included overtime. We performed it on police, fire, and then all other agencies.
So isn't that going to be released
test.
as part of the CAFR?
Correct.
But I would ask, since it is complete, I would ask that she release the part dealing with the overtime in the police department at this time so that we may review it, and that is my motion.
Second.
So hold on. So are we permitted to release things from the CAFR before the CAFR itself is released? Director Ramey?
You are not, when you perform an audit, you're typically required to perform in its entirety. You can do dual audits across the board or dual testing. So you can do that, but we did not go in the CAFR with the mindset of doing a dual audit, meaning that we was going to take information from one audit and use it for another, but you can do that, but that was not the mindset for that particular area.
So you have a portion of the CAFR that's completed that has to do with BPD overtime.
Deal with police payroll in general.
Payroll in general, and that will all be released as part of the CAFR.
Correct.
Okay, so my question is, are you permitted, go ahead, Director.
Yeah, my concern is that the overtime issue is subject to present litigation. I have a concern with any information that might be released which could be used in an adverse manner by the FOP that is engaged in the litigation against the city.
That's fine.
Councilman.
I feel like council committees are periodically, we receive information from agencies that we are not expected to share for public purposes, but to review for internal purposes. Would it be sufficient to release this to the commission?
Can I make a comment?
Mr. President?
This is not to say that we don't trust anyone, but there was an incident about a couple weeks ago where information was shared confidential with the council, and the news media had it before they could get off the phone. So I would prefer that we don't do anything that adversely affect our chances with this lawsuit with the FOP. Now that's only my opinion, because I'm not saying that anybody of this body would share it, but information has been shared before.
I concur with the President and the Director of Finance. Madam Comptroller?
I agree.
Okay. So is there any other discussion on this? Is there a...
Were there any findings in the CAFRA that could possibly lead to any type of fraud situation that you could turn over to the Office of the Inspector General if were found?
Okay, the audit has not been completed, the CAFR. Once the audit has been completed and been presented, at that time, we can release information to you. But the CAFR is a sensitive audit, and so due to the nature of that audit, we have to keep that keep the information concealed until it is finalized in its entirety. But, and so I can't tell you anything about that audit. I'm sorry.
Mr. Chair.
Councilman.
So when do you expect to be able to release the audit for the CAFR?
The CAFR, although it will be completed at the December 31st timeframe, it is not due to be released until we have finalized with the single audit portion. The single audit portion is due to be finalized on March 31st, but we do anticipate it being finalized prior to that date. So they usually get submitted together, and so it'll be presented probably around mid-March, hopefully, if not by the end of March.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
So I'd like to make a motion.
There's a motion on.
I'll recall the motion.
Okay.
Yeah, the motion I'd like to put forth is that any overtime audit information prepared by the Department of Audits will not be shared, will not be released. That's the motion.
Second.
Motion by Raymond, second by Council President Young. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay.
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 Okay, motion carries 4-2.
Okay.
Okay, and we are, if there's no other specific discussion, I think we're ready for the update from the city auditor on Group B audits.
Okay. So if you can turn to slide 2. Oh, he needs a copy. So you need a copy. Copy, you need a copy?
No, I'm good.
Oh, okay. So for the recreation, thank you. There were 3 audits left for the performance. Recreation and Parks, that's on the agenda to be presented on the 19th, this Wednesday. The other 2 audits, Law and Police, both field work has been completed. Binder and report is in review for Law. Findings have been drafted and forwarded to the Law Department. Police, the exact same situation, except we did encounter some issues with the Police Department. The findings have been drafted for the current and prior year. Issues are the client provided no support for any of their tests, only number data. There was no way for the Department of Audits to perform any of the testing for the Police Department. Audits has requested another meeting today to clarify information or data on the recruitment particular performance measure. And this will give them an opportunity to clarify that they have no support. Another issue is that we were unable to determine the correct contact person. No one returned calls from the to the Department of Audits. And to date, we still have not received an engagement letter, signed engagement letter. We are not to begin an audit prior to the receipt of a signed engagement letter, but due to the timeline of this audit, we had to begin the audit. And the reason being because the contact person, again, we did not have, and we finally received the contact person in December. But all audits have been completed for the financial. Again, police will have all findings because they did not have any support for any of their audits.
So when is the police one expected to be completed?
Why?
The performance one for police?
What did he say?
When is it expected to be completed?
It is complete. We can't, they don't have any data, anything to support their numbers. They provided numbers to us 2 weeks ago. Last week we went back and asked them, could they give us any support to test? They said they do not have it. So today, again, we want to clarify that because we have already started drafting findings. And so everyone will be a finding. They have no support. And they said because there was transition and there was also some social information that they weren't able to get a hold of in time for the audit.
Who are you dealing with at the police department?
Right now, it's Margaret Barillero.
Mr. President?
Thank you. The police department don't have data to give to you, is what you said?
No data at all. So we
find
wanted
that-
to make
I
sure
find
on the
that-
recruitment piece, because we thought they would have something on that, and they have nothing.
I find that disturbing. I really do, because it's their responsibility to have the data to support what they do as a state agency that has funding from the city of Baltimore as well. And I think you should press them more for that information, and they should provide that information. I'm quite sure they have it. So I don't know why they don't want to give it to you, but you should press them a little harder. Or some kind of way we can attach it to their funding.
We've asked them several times, we can ask again, but they said they have nothing to support the numbers. They have numbers, but they have nothing to support, no hard data to support how they came up with the numbers.
So that's a real problem. You know, they have the largest budget in the city of Baltimore, the police department do. They spend more overtime than the whole Recreation and Parks Agency. You mean to tell me they don't have people in there that can dissect that data and give you the information that you need? That's totally unacceptable.
They did say they had transitioned people. I know that may be an excuse. That may be an excuse, but they said they transitioned people, some people that was in the role changed.
I can say that too. You know, I had a couple people transition out of my office, but the work still went on. That's what you call SOP, standard operating procedures, and they should have that.
Right.
Question. Did they say how they came up with that data?
No, that's what we want to meet with them today
just
to get
gave
an
you-
understanding.
She said, he's talking to the mic.
They have no information at all except numbers, and we want to make sure that they understood what we were looking for. We can't just use numbers.
Right, you need to
And
test
so,
them.
correct. And so far, from what I know today, we still have no data.
Okay.
Ms. Askew, what is the total amount of money we're talking?
I don't know the money. I don't have.
What's the
that
number they
information.
gave you? As far as
I
what,
don't have any of the specifics.
are we talking millions? Are we talking?
This is one of the main areas is recruitment. So the
Correct.
recruitment data.
So we're
Yeah.
talking millions, as well as they haven't even signed your engagement letter.
Correct.
So the police are not cooperating whatsoever in your audit.
I'm not going to say they're not cooperating. We were given a contact person, and in giving that person, we found out that was the wrong person. We finally were told.
And
that
when was that?
That was in November. Then we were told the person Marguerite would be the one. Margaret would be the person that we would be able to work with. But then, whatever her position is, she wasn't able to get us on her agenda until I think the beginning of December, with her team. So, but they did meet with us.
And then they presented you with their financials and no backup to that,
This is performance.
right?
So it was on information related to mainly recruitment.
Recruiting, so backing up travel and that type of thing.
Right.
But you're telling me there's no backup, there's no invoices, there's no travel, there's no airlines, there's nothing? When you asked for it, they gave you nothing?
We have nothing.
Unacceptable. Totally unacceptable. So, Karan, can you let the administration know that this committee asked for certain information through the auditor, and the police department is not, being agreeable? What is that? 1, 2, 3.
They're
Number
cooperating.
nine.
They're
The
cooperating. They just don't have the data. They really are trying. They said they have, at least in front of us, they really appear to be trying.
They have it, and they need to give it to you. They have it.
Okay.
They came up with the number somehow.
Councilman Henry.
Ms. Askew, I appreciate your tact and diplomacy, but if they're not signing your engagement letter, which you need to start the audit, they won't give you a contact person, and they're providing no support for your tests, I think it's fair for us to say they are not cooperating with you in the performance of this audit. So.
Can I say something? I'm not saying that they are not cooperating, because when the Department of Audits had problems getting a contact person, I call the acting commissioner Tuggle, and immediately he put them in touch with someone. And
right.
so I wouldn't say that they're not cooperating. They just don't have the data to support their numbers. Or either they do and they're not giving it to the Department of Audits.
Well, and so how hard is it to sign an engagement letter?
Yeah, that was going to be my question.
And if you started working on this in mid-October and it took till mid-December to get them, like, and the comptroller herself had to call over to the acting commissioner just to get a person for you to talk to. I mean, again, I appreciate your tact and diplomacy, but I'm comfortable saying that department is not cooperating, so.
And Mr. Chair, if I may, I concur with Councilman Henry. It seems like the agency is stonewalling the auditor, and no disrespect to you, Audrey, I think you do a great job, but we can tell when someone don't want to give up information. They come up with all kinds of excuses. They don't want to sign the engagement letter. That tells me that they don't want to be cooperative. I mean, I don't know how plain it could be. Sign the engagement letter.
So do you all want to invite the CFO and or
Yes.
whoever the commissioner is at the time to the next hearing in the spring?
So it occurs to me that at some point maybe we should use our inspector general, who we have, you know, specifically for now. I think one of the issues that we have run into in the past is because the police department is technically a state agency, there become issues with what we in city government can require from them. But I would think that if the IG asked for information on top of the city auditor's request and were also rebuffed.
Well, Councilman, with the police department being a state agency, I don't know whether the IG have the statutory power
Right.
to ask them for anything, just like we can't.
I actually have an MOU with the police department, and I work with them, so I believe that I would be able to get the information. I also have subpoena power.
Okay, yeah, we gave her that.
So we have a variety of different mechanisms here. We have the council, we have our judiciary committee, which has subpoena power. We have the administration, we have the comptroller that has the Office of Audits within it. We have the IG. And because I'm afraid we might be getting outside of the scope of what this commission can do specifically as a group. Do we want to would it be appropriate to bring in the CFO and the police commissioner to the next?
I think so, Mr. Chair.
Is everyone in agreement with that?
Yeah.
And then whichever, if the IG wants to investigate that, if the city council pursues it, if the administration pursues it.
So are you
Separately.
saying not to complete the findings?
No, please complete it, but
Complete it,
I think
okay.
we want to have a discussion with police leadership to talk about the need to be as cooperative and to the comptroller's point, I guess they've been somewhat cooperative, more timely in their engagement with you.
Okay.
Is it everyone?
Perhaps also Ms. Askew might want to recircle, now that it's reached a much more elevated level, to give them the opportunity to perhaps come up with the backup, because it might appear a little quicker now.
Right, okay. Okay.
Please continue.
The last two audits, again, they are complete. Law Department, for financial audits, I apologize. Law, field work has been completed. The binder and the report is in review. With one finding was sent to the Director of Finance, and they have received an unmodified opinion, which is a clean opinion. Planning, field work has been completed. Binder and the report is in review. And there was two findings. They were sent to the Director of Finance, again, unmodified opinion. And that's the financials. And then here's the summary from September, and I believe you all have a copy. I didn't know you were going to be given a copy, but you have a copy of the status. So we stated that all audits were completed for the financial side. There were some changes, so we have these last two outstanding. And then the performance, you see that we said that we had law and police, and again, they are finalized, but some issues on both of them.
Ms. Askew, not to interrupt, but can you jump ahead to what the current status is? That's as of September, right?
Yes, September's meeting. So all audits have been completed.
All 16?
Yes.
Okay. So audits are
They have
being-
not been issued to the board, but they have all been completed.
But we are now completing audits on time in the city of Baltimore. That's a good thing. Yeah, I didn't mean to be
If I-
crass. No, it's a good
Yes.
thing, right?
Okay.
I think. Or just,
Can I ask a point
Please.
here? At the last meeting, which on the 16th, I had asked to get copies of the audits sent to myself, and I actually believe Councilman Henry did as well. On Friday, I got copies of 9 audits. I believe you presented to the Board of Estimates on Wednesday,
Yes.
correct?
Yes, 7 audits.
And the audits that I received were Department of Health, Human Resources, Transportation, 5 audits and 4 performance audits.
Two performance audits.
2 performance audits. My concern is that I just received these on Friday, and going through these reports, I mean, these are very concerning reports in that they are qualified opinions, they have adverse findings in them, and I literally just got them on Friday. In fact, this whole thing in front of me are the audits that I received. And I'm very concerned that, you know, we're the group that does the oversight, yet I haven't even had time to really focus on the findings in them, and some of them are very concerning. So, I mean, granted, it says up there it's done, but to me, what's in these reports for this committee not to have really studied is very concerning. And I would ask that we, the committee, really take the opportunity to look through these audits, because they're 20-some pages. They're unbelievable amount of findings in them, and some of the responses to the findings were very concerning to me. So I would like to have the opportunity so that when we could meet on this and discuss, because some of these findings don't make sense to me I work for KPMG, I work for the largest accounting firm. They don't make sense to me, in that certain findings and the way things were written is a major concern. So I think that we, as a committee, need to look carefully on this. I had the opportunity to share all this with my colleague, you know, Councilman Henry, and he was shocked at this because he hadn't gotten copies of them either. So as an oversight group, I don't think that we can, you know, without really taking the time to look at what you've done, I mean, and what this shows, I just feel that I can't even comment on it all.
So if I'm not, or just, are you talking about the timing with respect to this hearing?
Well, I'm talking about the fact that, like, looking at these audits, if I go to the health department, because that was a big one for me, and we looked at they got that, I think they received, it was finished in September, but it wasn't released till November, and then it isn't dated till December. So I mean, and we just need to have the opportunity to really look at these audits.
Right, but the audits are released to us once they're delivered to the Board of Estimates.
Which was Wednesday.
Right.
Does everybody
Right.
here have copies of all these audits?
No, what happened was the secretary who actually has the listing of names is out. And so we did not have a full listing of the names, or we thought we did. So our IT specialist sent them to the people she thought was on the list. we still don't know the full list, but once that person returns, we will make sure this doesn't happen again. So we're not aware of everyone that
So
should have
the
received.
audits are sent out, what, a day or two after they're delivered to the Board of
They're actually
Estimates?
sent out the day of or the next day.
'Cause I received copies of them on Friday as well, but that's been standard, at least since I've been involved in this over the past 4 years, that audits get emailed to interested parties, usually a day or two after they're delivered to the BOE. But Councilman Henry?
So, Mr. Chair, I wanted to point out two things. First of all, this summary is the same summary we received
Correct.
in mid-September at our last biennial meeting. And at that time, we were told that there were 8 financial audits that were complete but had not been issued. And if I am accurately triaging this stack that were just sent out, there still is not in here financial audits for transportation.
No,
Is
you have
there-
transportation.
oh, okay. No, that's performance audit.
You have transportation,
Is there a transportation financial in here?
yes.
Okay, all right, so that one is, planning is the one we were discussing.
Correct.
That, is there a Rec and Parks financial
Yes.
in here? Okay. All right, and, well, the police is here, no, yes, police is here, and
Police,
is
you
laws,
have police.
pardon?
Wait a minute.
No, not performance, financial.
For
Just-
financial, you have police, you don't have law and planning.
We don't have law and planning, okay. So my first question is that why do we still not have issued financial audits for agencies that were completed more than 3 months ago? Like, the audit has been done, and we were told that at our first meeting this year, and now 3 months later, it's still not being issued, and this is where I wanted to check in. My understanding is that your agency is not issuing audits until somebody else says it's okay. And is that somebody else the finance department or the individual agency being audited?
It's not, I don't know about the word okay, but what happened was we were completed with those audits at the time. Subsequent to those dates, we received additional information. And so we went back and we met with the finance department staff. And from the information, the updated information we received, we performed additional testing, and then we issued the reports in December.
Okay, well, so I guess, Mr. Chair, what I would say, following up on the Inspector General's comments, is I understand that this may not have been done in any, purposefully unhelpful fashion, but this is a lot of work product to have generated a couple days before a hearing that we had already scheduled
Right.
for when we would be reviewing this. And so I'm just wondering if maybe it would be worthwhile for us to schedule another meeting in early January when, after we had a chance to actually read through all of this information carefully and frankly take advantage of the council president's fiscal analyst, who, I think this is the kind of thing where, it would be helpful for the board to have our own eyes looking at this before we try to ask Ms. Askew questions, detailed questions, and make productive and useful comments about the information she's provided, because, this is a lot of information to go through.
So that's not a problem. I just want to be clear, because it sounds like there's a grievance, and I don't think that any grievance has occurred. So I want to be clear about what the process is. So the charter requires that 8 agencies, this year was Group B, have a performance and financial audit conducted by the city auditor. That audit starts when the engagement letter is signed. The city auditor has completed all 16 of those audits. There is a process after the audit is completed, once the city auditor brings it to the Board of Estimates. Once the Board of Estimates approves the audit product, it is then released. There's a distribution list. We get it 1 to 2 days later. The timing of today's meeting was scheduled, as you all are aware, 3 months ago. I think we scheduled it within a week of our September 19th meeting. So this was scheduled 2.5 months out. We had no way of knowing when Ms. Askew and her department would be presenting these audit products to the Board of Estimate. We just know that they're required to be completed by the end of the calendar year, which per my previous comments, it seems like we're on track for, and this situation in general, in terms of getting audits completed, has been corrected, which is a good thing. In terms of whether or not we can review the information in them, I don't see any reason why we can't, and why we can't come back in the spring. January, probably February would be more appropriate with the holidays and give everyone time to consume the information in the audits. And we are free to ask questions of Ms. Askew or to call in agency heads to discuss the findings of these audits. But I just want to be clear, because the way this conversation's been framed, it sounds like there's some type of grievance with the process, and I'm not sure that I see any issues with the process. I think the process is actually finally working very well, and so if we want to call for another hearing to discuss the matters, that's fine. I just don't want that to get conflated with there's some type of grievance with the process when the process appears to be working.
Mr. Chair, I think I agree with you in the sense that I don't think that there has been I don't think, it's not that the process hasn't been followed, I think that as we're still in the first couple of years of, fleshing this out, one of the things I'm now seeing is that both the administration and the board are working on an end of the year time frame. So it is what we have just seen is everybody waited until the end of the year to do this. And so their audits were approved the second week of December when we had our second meeting in the third week of December. And what I'm wondering if what we should shoot for in the future, and maybe, I don't think this is a legal change as much as just something we ask the administration for, is to make certain that instead of shooting for getting stuff done by the end of the year, maybe shoot for getting it done by November.
But that's not what the charter says. So the charter is very clear that the audit products be completed by the end of the calendar year. What we can do to accommodate your concern is we can meet, instead of meeting in December,
meet in January.
We can meet in late January, early February. But I just want to be clear that the process is working. I take responsibility for that. That's my fault that I scheduled the meeting for end of December. That won't happen again. Your concerns certainly haven't fallen on deaf ears. And to the IG's points, there certainly are findings that are concerning that we need to discuss and discuss publicly. So we will reconvene, or at the end of this hearing, we will schedule a follow-up, our next meeting for sometime late January, early February, and then we can talk about the results of the Part B audits at that meeting, and we can plan on doing that every year moving forward so that we're syncing up our meetings with the schedule that's required by the charter, because we can't really work around the schedule in the charter, but the commission can schedule its meetings in a more appropriate manner.
And Mr. Chairman, I wanted to note that the Board of Estimates does not approve the audits, they note them.
Except, no is the appropriate terminology?
Yeah, no.
Okay, understood.
I do have one more question. Reviewing one of the audits, which I know you all haven't had a chance to do, but it said that the Department of Audits sent a communication to governance on October 12th, stating that finance had communications with another audit firm. Now, is that a private communication, or where would I be able to see that particular document? Because having worked in, it's an unusual thing that Apparently, the audit, according to this, the audit was done earlier, probably in September. I don't know, Ms. Askew, was this, I'm looking right now at the health department. Was that audit, when was that audit done originally?
Originally, at our September meeting, we had finalized all of those audits.
Right, you told me it was done in September. So then, according to this, there was a communication that was sent on October 12th for the other law audit firm. And after that, journal entries were changed, and it became this particular finding. So I'm just wondering, how can I get, is that a private document, or has that, can anyone tell me how I can get a copy of that document?
I don't,
Okay, hold on. The city auditor sent that document out, so the city auditor should be able to respond.
Okay,
it's a letter that goes to governance, so that's the president of the Board of Estimates, which is President Jack Young, and all the board members. The only way that, and now he can authorize for me to give you a copy of that if he wants, and I can give you that, but it's up to him. He's the board president. It's addressed to him initially.
President Young?
It's up to you.
Say that
It's
again.
up to you if you would like for her to have a copy of the letter.
A copy of the letter from where?
The letter that she's reading about, the letter that I sent out on October the 12th.
Is it the reason why she shouldn't get it?
She can have, I actually have copies of everything here, 'cause I didn't know what you was gonna ask
Who's
me.
asking for it?
What is the letter?
I have, it's the letter that, I have a copy of it. I have, because I tried to keep a copy of everything. I didn't know what y'all was gonna ask me about. I do have a copy. It's a letter that I sent to the board regarding these financial audits.
The Board of
Of
Estimates?
estimates, because it has to be sent to them for them to be aware of the update on this. Now, the issue, it was kind of fuzzy because it's biannual
Right.
audit, so it was tossed between you and the president of the board, but it's at the end, it's the final say, so the final approval or the note, it would be the
We're
president
going
of the board
to
of estimates.
defer to the council president because he's president of the Board of
Okay.
Estimates.
Let me think about that,
Okay.
and I'll get back to you.
Okay. So just for the next meeting, can you please make sure the chart's updated to, or do you have the December version of that?
No, the reason I put this here, because I want you to know where I said I was going to be at, and I want you to, I didn't know you was going to have a copy of it today, but right now, everything has been completed with the exception of being discussed at the board.
Okay, yeah, just for the next meeting, if you could please
Okay.
have updated version as of today.
Okay.
Okay, please continue.
And that's the
Councilman
last
Henry.
slide.
Oh, well, yeah, I was like, she's gotten to the questions part, and it's the questions that I specifically would like to know if we can table the questions until the next meeting.
Absolutely. So we're going to need to, when are you going to start scoping performance audits for Group A for calendar year 2019?
For the financial side,
Performance.
for the performance, I thought I'm to wait for you.
Okay.
I thought that's what the process was.
Do you have the resources to put together like a matrix or a spreadsheet for the committee and include in there, because we've already done the Group A audits back in 2017. Can you put in there what each of the objectives were for each of the performance audits
For the past, in the
for
past.
2017 so that we can kind of digest that and share with
Okay.
you any concerns or direction we'd like you to go in for the 2019 round of Group A?
Yes.
Okay, is that something you could get us before the holiday
We
break?
have that, we have that.
Okay,
Yep.
so that's a quick turnaround, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, if you could send that.
Send it to you?
Send it to me this week.
Okay.
Me and Marguerite, and we'll get it disseminated to the commission.
Okay.
And then we will circle up over email this week, and Marguerite will help us find a date for our next meeting. So at that next meeting, it sounds like we are going to first discuss, well, first, if any one-offs come up, like planning and police department between now and then, we'll discuss those. Number two, we will discuss the scope of the performance audits for Group A for calendar year 2019. And 3, we will discuss any questions we have of Ms. Askew for specific agency audit reports for 2018 on both the financial and the performance side.
Okay.
We will, are we going to invite any other agency officials besides police? Or do we want to start making those agency officials come for the first meeting of the year to answer any questions?
Might be good to have them available.
Just a logistical note to share with Marguerite and the rest of the board is looking ahead at January and February. There are no Mondays that would be available for this. All the Mondays in January and February are either council meetings, federal holidays, or the public hearing for the police commissioner.
Well, that's
So
why,
we should look for a Wednesday.
well, that's why we should all be grateful the good Lord has blessed us with 168 hours in the work week. We'll find another time.
Oh, well, I meant in terms of, at this point, we have 2 confirmed slots per week where we can be televised live on Cable 25.
I'm sure that we could work with Karan and Charm TV to get a
Okay.
additional scheduled time slot that meets everyone's needs. Right. Thank you, as always, Mr. Banks. Okay, so we'll circle up as a group over email with Marguerite, and we'll get that scheduled. We'll wait for the matrix from you, and we will invite all of the agency heads to the next meeting to be prepared to answer any questions about their respective agency audits. Is everyone good with that? Mr. President, Director, Comptroller, IG, Councilman, everyone's good? Any further questions? Motion to adjourn?
So, second.
Okay. All those in favor? Aye? Aye. All right. We're now in recess. Thank you.